everyone. I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding bootcamps for them. You can use the Course Report website to research the best coding and data science bootcamps all over the world, as well as insights on which coding languages to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your bootcamp experience. Today, I'm speaking with Marwan Kashef from Lighthouse Labs about data visualization and 3 popular data viz tools. Marwan has a Master's of Management in AI and now helps students as an instructor and mentor at Lighthouse Labs. So Marwan, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Before we dive into these 3 data viz tools, first, I would like to know, how did you get into data analytics and data science, and what inspired you to teach at Lighthouse Labs?
For sure. Thanks for having me, Jess. So I got into data analytics around 6 years ago, right out of undergrad. I originally specialized in finance, but after a few internships, I decided that data piqued my interest the most. And then I spent around 5 years working in HR analytics and talent acquisition analytics, and then pivoted to more advanced analytics after pursuing that master's degree in AI. And in terms of Lighthouse Labs, during my pivot in that journey, I actually completed an intro to web dev course with Lighthouse Labs. And I really love the style and the structure of the content delivery. So it's kind of my goal when I mastered my own craft and something that I'm passionate about, that I'd be able to return and be able to teach that in the same way.
So let's start at the very beginning. What actually is data visualization?
Yeah, good question. So data visualization, basically, it's an accessible way for anyone to be able to understand outliers, trends, and patterns in their data. There's different avenues you can take when you're doing data analysis or visualization. You can create charts, diagrams, maps even, as well as countless other types of diagram techniques. And I'll call it data viz from now on, just so it's shorter. So data viz is best used when you want to explain the key trends and findings in a way that enables observation and discussion amongst your audience. And what I really mean by that is, instead of stating the conclusion yourself, you empower the audience and the user to come to that conclusion on their own, and then you add your own supplementary commentary and analysis.
Okay, and then what do data visualizations like help a data professional or even non-technical folks understand?
Basically, it adds a lot of color to discussions that were previously based on pure instinct. Visualizations typically handle and differentiate instinct from fact in a way that's unbiased and neutral, as long as the underlying methodology is accurate and the data is accurate. So basically, it just facilitates a focused and factual conversation that's typically a lot more productive and actionable than using opinions and natural biases that you could have staying for any place for X amount of time and basing your judgments based off that.
And does data viz involve just like the data team, or does it rely on others involved with the project, such as like developers or managers or even the client?
Good question. So typically, a lot of the data work is obviously taken on by the data team, but the requirements of what needs to be done is really a unified collective effort. So if you're creating a data visualization or a set of dashboards for a team, let's say a marketing team or a CS team, typically you'd need to have their input as to what their best case scenario looks like in terms of what they want to be able to see and analyze. And then you take those requirements and then you break them down into piece parts, and you can see what you're able to do with the data you have and what you can't do. What you can't do, sometimes you can reach out to developers to try and enable the either collection of the missing data or creation of the data that you never had in the first place. So in general, the dirty work is done by the data team, but the actual effort is a collective one.
And technically, data viz has actually been around for a really long time, like since humans have used charts and tables and maps and all kinds of things. So should today's data professionals have a good handle on older versions of graphing, charting, et cetera, in addition to all these new data viz tools that are required for big data?
Absolutely. Personally, I would say that 75% of the time, the more simple the visualization, the more accessible it is. Similar to how you don't want to be able to explain a joke, you want it to be implied. You don't want to have to explain what your visualization looks like and how it works. And you don't want it to be so complex that it takes away from the relevancy of why you're doing it in the first place. So I think it's very good to establish that foundation and understand those old means of charting. And that being said, it offers a lot of value because it's a great go-to when you don't know what to start with when analyzing your data. Sometimes doing a bar chart, line chart, scatter plot are the quickest ways to get quick intuitions for what you can do with your data. So it's really enablers of sometimes more complex analytics and more complex visualizations. And given that we're heading into a world where a lot of visualizations might be creating themselves in the future, I think that the tools themselves are secondary, and you can pick those up very easily as long as you understand when and where to use certain types of visualizations and which visualizations to look for.
So Marwan, let's have you share your screen with us so we can dive into the tools, Matplotlib, Seaborn, and Plotly. And could you tell us a bit about what a data visualization looks like in Matplotlib?
Yeah, for sure. So we won't go through the nitty gritty code here, but in general, it allows you to do a lot of basic to advanced plotting. Matplotlib is extremely flexible and fluid, so you have basically no limitations on what you can create and how it looks. And I'll just kind of go through this document where I've created some fake data sets and used some existing ones just to show you what can be done. So in some cases, you can even do a picture-in-picture type of visualization where you have two simultaneously at the same time. You're able to have, add markers if you'd like. You can change colors. And then for some types of visualizations, you can enable interactions, as you can see here, where I can hover over, and at the bottom of my screen, you'll see kind of the coordinates of this graph. You can kind of shift through, look at various pieces. And then you can see here, if we create trends, you can see that this is very similar to what you could create, let's say, in the older Excel versions. It looks very similar to that format-wise. The one thing you'll note, though, is that to create these, there usually is quite a bit of code to get there. And then same thing here where you have your stacked bar with your whisker element. Again, typically, this is not something you could just choose by default. You'd have to write it out all by code. But again, it's very flexible, and you can create some very effective diagrams this way. With a few more visualizations here, like even with pie charts, you can even use this setting called explode, where you can say which part of the pie graph you want to be separated from the rest. So you can kind of hone in and zone in on one specific element of a graph if you wish to. And you can do more complex ones like this, but again, they're very specific use cases in general.
Okay, and for Matplotlib, are there like specific instances or occasions when this is the best tool to use?
Yeah, so I think you'd use it on two separate occasions. One, when you're trying to do quick and dirty analysis, similar to the first couple diagrams, where it's very basic, just trying to see your data trended very quickly to get intuition. Or if you want to do something like this, where it's much more integrated, much more meticulous, and you have a lot of elements at the same time that you need to customize yourself, that's a great use case for Matplotlib, because even here you can see with this code, it's probably almost 50, 60 lines of code with tons of functions you have to create, but you have full handle on what is actually visualized at the very end.
And what are sort of the pros and cons of using this tool? It sounds like it does a lot.
Yes, so that's one of its major pros. It's very versatile, it's accessible, and it's a universal tool that plugs into all kinds of backends. And as you see here, it allows for all types of customizations and can be tailored to anything you're looking for. In terms of the cons, as you're going to see, is that you do need to know how to wield Python and understand the syntax of Matplotlib, which is actually based on a software called MATLAB that was used a lot for mathematics and engineering. So there is a steep learning curve there, but to address that con, they do have really good documentation. So you can follow along to how to create those visualizations.
All right, so Marwan, could you show us what a data viz actually looks like in Seaborn?
For sure. So similar to our first one, we'll go through a little workbook here with a series of them that we can create. Overall, you'll see that compared to Matplotlib, these look a lot more crisp and more aesthetically pleasing overall. And you'll notice that to create pretty complex views, you don't need to use as much code as we saw before. So in general, you see within 5-6 lines of code, you can change the color scheme very easily. It's a lot more easy to look at, and it's very straightforward. There's nothing too complex going on here. But in consequence, you are able to create much more slightly complex views quickly without the need for writing functions and aggregate functions. So you'll see here, same types of graphs, just again, a lot more aesthetically pleasing and easier on the eye overall.
And what are like those specific use cases when Seaborn is the data viz tool you use?
So Seaborn is actually built on top of Matplotlib. So it's kind of an add-on onto it. So the pro is that if you want to do something quick and it's very simple and limited, you can use Seaborn to make it look really nice and use that in a PowerPoint deck or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of interactiveness, it's not as interactive in general, and it is usually very static. But the main limitation of it is that you are very limited in what you can customize. What you see is kind of what you get. You can't do what you can do in Matplotlib, where you can kind of write infinite statements to make it look exactly how you want. It has to fit within the box and the requirements of those specific views in Seaborn.
And do you have to know Matplotlib in order to even use Seaborn, or can you use Seaborn without really knowing that much about Matplotlib?
Through using their documentation and obviously using Google for Stack Overflow, you can get away with just using Seaborn.
Okay.
But if you run into the problem where you do need to customize and understand what needs to be done, typically you can use Matplotlib and Seaborn at the same time within the same line of code to address the weaknesses of Seaborn while still getting the effects of Seaborn. So using both at the same time is usually paramount.
Let's look at this third data viz tool, Plotly, and see what data viz looks like in this one.
Mm-hmm. So Plotly is one of the, if not the most popular data visualization tool when it comes to using Python in industry. So if we look at our example here of our stock data, this is just kind of fictitious stocks, and these are percentage increases or decreases. Typically, if you're using a library called pandas, you can just quickly plot it using Matplotlib. But you see here, as soon as we add iplot, just that one statement using Plotly, now this same static diagram becomes fully interactive, where you can actually scroll, zoom into a piece of data, and look at all the different stocks at the same time, look at those differences. You have much more usability. You'll see here you have a little bit of a toolbar. You can look at one data point at a time, or as you saw originally, multiple in tandem, and you can quickly reset. It just allows for much more interactiveness with only one piece of code, which is very powerful. And if you kind of go down, you'll see the use case of doing that, especially when it comes to a scatter plot, where now you can use a lasso, and then you can look at a very specific section, and then hone in on those data points and keep diving deeper. And as you go down again, you can create the exact same things you can in Matplotlib and Seaborn in terms of a bar chart, for example, but you do have that luxury of being able to jump into the details much more easily. And yeah, you can create histograms, and the beauty of it is the interactive portion. And as you go here, you can even create something as complex as this, depending on the use case, where you can actually interact with the diagram, zoom in, and then this is much more powerful than both Matplotlib and Seaborn because of that interactive piece on top of that. And the beauty of it is that you can not only just create visualizations within a notebook, you can actually create interactive dashboards that can be used by anyone in your organization, whether they're a Pythonista or not. So if you see here on these dashboards, this is all created using Plotly. And you can see here, if I filter, all the other views automatically update and filter. So you'll see it's a very effective way to look at your data, and all of the source code is Python. So it's fully customizable, which enables what can be enabled in Matplotlib in terms of the unlimited customization, while also giving you that aesthetically pleasing portion of Seaborn. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And you'll see here in the next two dashboards, you can have multiple different types of visualizations on the same view, and it enables your users to really be able to answer deeper questions rather than having to recreate views over and over again, depending on the different cut you're trying to look at.
This looks like such a powerful tool. So, who is typically using this tool? Like, how is it typically used in an organization?
Yeah, for sure. So for the first two examples, usually Matplotlib or Seaborn, if you had to create some form of deck for your senior leaders, usually just use those static images and use them in a PowerPoint. But with Plotly, you can create custom interactive visualizations and dashboards that anyone can kind of log in on your private server and see updated daily, hourly, etc. So it gives much more accessibility to the data and allows for much more richness in conversation. So you can create these interactive dashboards. So that's the real use case there.
And since this is kind of the most sophisticated tool that you showed us of the three, is this also the most advanced and most difficult to kind of learn for anybody who's just getting into data?
Yes, it definitely is much more advanced. The pro here is that it is the best of both worlds of Matplotlib and Seaborn. The con is that, as you were saying, there is a steep learning curve. It does have its own syntax, so you have to kind of read through the documentation, read through quite a few examples to be able to really wield this as best as you can.
Marwan, Lighthouse Labs is offering a really engaging upskill course series around data analytics. And I'm just wondering, who are these upskill courses aimed at? And, what kinds of things will people be learning in them?
Yeah, for sure. So the upskill courses are really geared towards anyone. It's designed purposely for data beginners to provide a ground up understanding of data analysis and the various tools that are used in industry. So in terms of what you would learn, if you see the kind of the overview of content on this screen, we really start with laying the foundation of understanding what data analysis is, how data is collected and created, and then once we have that understanding, we move on to how do you actually leverage that data and visualize it in a way that you can kind of derive actionable insights. We start first with Excel to get you acquainted and used to the concepts of data viz. And then once that's completed, we jump into Tableau, which is one of the industry leading tools for data viz, to dive deeper and create much more complex and sophisticated visualizations and dashboards. So once you kind of leave this course, you have a good understanding of data practices, the different types of data and data structures, as well as how to actually use it and leverage it for your organization.
Cool. And who are the instructors for this course? Are you are you teaching this course as well?
Yes, I teach this course myself, and in general, instructors for any of the data science courses are anyone who either has worked in the industry for quite a while, did education in data science, or in my case, kind of pivoted into the industry and spent a few years working. So we kind of have that appreciation for the difficulty in the data science journey, especially when it comes to changing those industries.
What can data professionals learn from failed data viz?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if a given data viz is kind of deemed as being ineffective or a failure in your words, then a data professional can really take that feedback into account and either create a custom visualization tailored to that specific audience, kind of addressing those concerns, whether it be kind of the way it was communicated, whether it was too cluttered, a bit too much cognitive overload potentially, and either make it more simplistic or more complex, depending on that. And then if there's confusion as to what the best practice is, you can kind of use a process of elimination where you show multiple views for the same data set and seeing which one the audience is able to absorb the best. And anytime I've received feedback for any of the work that I've done when it comes to data viz, I create actually a mini checklist that's ever growing of feedback that I've received so that in general, things that pop out as a general issue across these visualizations can be captured. So to give you an example, avoiding the color deep red or lime green on a visualization, or making your visualizations colorblind friendly to kind of improve and enable accessibility and inclusion are really important trends that I've noticed. And it's really good to have that ever growing list so that when you create a net new visualization for any audience, you kind of have a key list of rules that you can kind of tend to.
Those are great tips. Thanks so much for sharing that. And the data science, data analytics fields are just continuing to expand and to grow. Are there any tools or methodologies out there that data professionals today should have in their skills toolbox in order to stay relevant?
For sure. I think when it comes to relevance, it's always important to have your foundations kind of mastered. So in terms of key tools, it would really be understanding Excel, Python, and SQL. SQL being very paramount and much more in use these days. Typically, in any organization, if you can yield the power of leveraging databases and querying them properly, you're kind of a rock star already. So it's a very powerful tool. And when it comes to data viz specifically, any of the libraries we went through today would be a great asset to have, especially when you're asked to create a report based on your data analysis, as well as being able to yield either of the industry tools such as Power BI or Tableau.
And for those data newbies who may be watching or reading the transcript, what kinds of resources do you recommend that they check out?
Yeah, so I'm a very big fan of the medium segment towards data science. They actually have articles that are released almost hourly on new practices, new algorithms that are used in the space, as well as instructional documents on how to break into data science and how to apply to different jobs and deal with certain interviews. So it's a very comprehensive resource that's kind of ever growing and has a very, very strong community. Even when it comes to data analysis, when you encounter an error, or you're pursuing a project, typically someone on Medium in this segment has created a walkthrough or a code along where you can kind of reference that. So I find that a very powerful resource. And in terms of two others, one would be infoworld.com, where they do post trends and like key patterns that are happening in the AI and analytics industry. And finally, something lighter, which is TechCrunch, where you just see kind of activity in the space as to what companies are doing, what they're specializing in, and what analytics, data science, and AI are actually being used for in industry.
And that's a great place to wrap up this intro to data viz. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Marwan, about all of these data viz tools. So we will be posting a recording and a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for Lighthouse Labs, just in case you are inspired and interested in applying for one of their upcoming cohorts. And thanks so much to all of you for watching. Tweet at us, email us, let us know which topic you'd like us to cover next on the Course Report blog. And in the meantime, follow Course Report on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're a bootcamp alumni, don't forget to post a review of your own bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone thinking of getting into tech today.